Burgess Meredith died in 1997 with an estate worth around $15 million. He had 4 marriages, children from different relationships, and a son he raised quietly in Malibu, away from Hollywood. For nearly 3 decades, the details of his will stayed sealed. Now it has been opened, and what is inside has people furious. There are names that should be there but are not. There are amounts that do not make sense. And there is one decision that has his own family divided in ways nobody saw coming. The man who played Mickey in Rocky left behind something far more shocking than anyone expected. Burgess Meredith came into the world on November 16, 1907, in Cleveland, Ohio. And from the start, home was not a safe place. His father, William George Meredith, was a doctor, and from the outside that might have sounded respectable, even stable. But inside the house, there was another truth. He drank heavily, and when he drank, his temper turned dangerous. The family lived under the shadow of his anger. Instead of warmth, there was shouting. Instead of peace, there was tension. Instead of safety, there was fear. For Burgess, childhood was not shaped by ordinary memories of comfort or play. It was shaped by the feeling that at any moment, something could go wrong. That pain stayed with him for the rest of his life. Many years later, in his memoir, So Far, So Good, he wrote that the memory of his childhood remained grim and incoherent, and that when he closed his eyes and looked back, he saw little except violence and fear. Those were not polished words meant for performance. They were the kind of words that come from a wound that never fully closed. He did not often speak at great length about those years, which makes that confession feel even heavier. When he thought of being a boy, he did not picture laughter or innocence. What returned to him was darkness, confusion, and the feeling of being trapped inside a home that should have protected him but never did. His mother, Ida Beth Meredith, could not really shield him from any of it. She came from a family of Methodist revivalists, and people who wrote about Burgess later described her as too fragile to fully grasp the damage being done inside the house. Whether she could not face it or simply had no strength left to fight it, the result was the same. Burgess grew up without a real defender. The family began to come apart early, and he was left in a lonely emotional world where there was little comfort to hold on to. So he reached for other places to live, at least in his mind. Books offered one escape. School plays offered another. In stories and performances, he could step into someone else's life for a while and leave his own behind. That hunger to get out, to become something else, pushed him forward. In 1926, he graduated from Hoosac School and earned a scholarship to Amherst College. For a boy who came from a broken and modest home, that should have been a turning point. It looked like the beginning of a better life. He entered Amherst as part of the class of 1931, worked hard, and tried to build a future through education. But hope alone could not solve money problems. The funds ran out, and he had to leave college before he could finish. Once again, the life he wanted slipped away just when it seemed close enough to touch. After that, survival took over. He moved through one rough job after another, doing whatever could bring in a little money. He worked as a merchant seaman. He sold vacuum cleaners door to door. He pushed ties on the street. He ran errands on Wall Street. None of it was glamorous. None of it promised security. He was simply trying to stay afloat. And yet, even in those unstable years, something inside him kept pushing toward the stage, toward reinvention, toward a life bigger than the one he had been handed. That urge showed up even in his name. He had been born George Burgess Meredith, but early in his career, he changed it and became Burgess Meredith. On paper, it was a small shift. In spirit, it meant more than that. it felt like he was peeling away from the frightened boy he had once been and building someone new in his place. He dropped George, put Burgess first, and slowly turned that new name into a public identity. Over time, that name would appear on Broadway playbills, Hollywood posters, and television credits. But before any of that happened, he still had to claw his way out of obscurity. By the end of the 1920s, America was falling into the Great Depression, and Meredith had almost nothing. He had left Amherst, bounced between jobs, and carried no real safety net. Then, in 1929, on what seems like a desperate impulse, he walked into Eva Le Gallienne's Civic Repertory Theater on West 14th Street in New York City and begged for a chance. Le Gallienne was already a major figure in American theater, and her company stood apart from the usual Broadway world. It staged serious work, sold cheap tickets, and tried to make theater something ordinary people could afford. Somehow, she took him in as an unpaid apprentice. That was a break, but it was not comfort. With no salary, Meredith lived hard. He scraped by however he could, sleeping in cramped corners, in basements, or wherever he could manage. Stories from that time describe freezing nights, shared blankets, and the kind of hunger that sharpens every ambition. For a year, he fetched props, swept stages, and watched everything. He studied obsessively. He learned by being close to the work, by staying near the light, even when he had no place of his own in it. Outside, the depression was crushing people. Inside the theater, he was building himself piece by piece. Then the climb began. In February 1930, he made his Broadway debut as Peter, the servant in Romeo and Juliet, in Le Gallienne's Civic Rep production. It was not a starring role, but it got him through the door, and once he was inside, he moved fast. Over the next few years, he kept working, kept learning, and kept gathering force. Then, in 1935, at only 27, he landed the lead role of Mio Romagna in Maxwell Anderson's Winterset. That was the performance that changed everything. Winterset was not light entertainment. It was a verse tragedy built around injustice, grief, and rage, and it drew from the Sacco and Vanzetti case that had already burned itself into American memory. Meredith's character, Mio, is a haunted young poet searching for the truth about his father's execution many years earlier. On stage, Meredith brought raw intensity to the role. Critics were struck by the force of him. Audiences were too. The show ran strongly, toured, and returned. In only a few years, he had gone from an unpaid apprentice sleeping rough to a Broadway star drawing serious attention. Hollywood noticed right away. After Winterset became a stage success, RKO brought Meredith into the 1936 film version, directed by Alfred Santel. It was his first credited film role, and unlike many young actors who spent years fighting for scraps, he arrived on screen carrying the same part that had already made his name in the theater. He played Mio again, now for the camera, bringing that same anger, sorrow, and restless energy into film. It was a rare leap. He did not drift into movies from the margins. He stepped into them through the front door. That early film success opened more work. By the late 1930s, he was building a screen career to match his stage reputation. And in 1939, he delivered one of his most important performances in Of Mice and Men. Directed by Louis Milestone and released by United Artists, the film adapted John Steinbeck's devastating story of drifting workers during the Depression. Meredith played George Milton, the quick-minded, worn-down man trying to guide and protect Lenny, played by Lon Chaney Jr. Together, they move through a world of poverty, longing, and hard choices, still chasing the dream of a little place of their own. The role gave Meredith room to show something deeper and quieter. George is sharp, tired, loyal, frustrated, and deeply human, and Meredith carried all of that, The emotional weight of the story rested heavily on him, especially as it moved toward the terrible mercy of its ending. Critics praised the performance, and the film became one of the major dramas of 1939. At that point, Meredith was no longer just a promising actor with theatrical roots. He had become a serious presence in American film. Around the same time, he also rose into leadership inside the profession itself. By 1938, still only around 30 years old, he had become president of Actors' Equity Association, the union representing thousands of performers. It was a powerful position, especially at a time when economic hardship and labor battles were shaping the lives of working actors. Meredith pushed for better wages and stronger support, and he took public positions that reflected his liberal beliefs and his anti-fascist commitments. For a while, he stood at the center of both artistic and political energy. But that kind of visibility would later come at a cost. The same man who had risen to speak for actors would eventually be dragged into the paranoia of the post-war blacklist. Years later, when anti-communist fear gripped America, his politics and public associations would be used against him. Film roles dried up, doors closed. The rise that had once seemed unstoppable was hit by a brutal reversal. Yet even that was still ahead. Before the blacklist, his life kept moving through success, love, damage, and reinvention. His personal life was as complicated as his career. In 1933, he married Helen Darby Berrien in a Cape May theater during a summer stock performance. She came from wealth and social standing, the daughter of a major industrial executive, and from the outside, the marriage looked almost like a fairy tale. But it did not last. By 1935, the strain of his fast-moving career and the pressures around them had broken the union apart. Their daughter Lee was still very young when they split. Helen kept custody, and Burgess kept moving, pulled by work and ambition. Then came tragedy. In April 1940, only 5 years after their divorce, Helen died by suicide in her New York apartment. She was 34. She was found beside a kitchen stove, and the details were painful and bleak. There had been a broken engagement before her death, and those close to the situation pointed to personal and emotional strain. Meredith was shocked. He later said he had seen her happy only a short time before. A loss like that does not disappear. It lingers, even when life keeps pulling forward. Before that tragedy, he had already entered and left another marriage. In January 1936, he married actress Margaret Perry at his home in Snedden's Landing, New York. She came from a theatrical family, and the match seemed natural on the surface. But two ambitious people, each pulled by their own work, did not find stability together. The marriage ended quietly in 1938. There were no children, only a brief relationship that burned fast and faded. Then, in 1944, he married Paulette Goddard, one of the great stars of the era. Their wedding took place at David O. Selznick's Beverly Hills estate, and it carried all the shine you would expect from old Hollywood. Goddard was glamorous, famous, and fresh from major success. Meredith was already a respected actor with both stage and screen credibility. Together, they looked like a power couple. They worked together too, appearing in films and sharing public attention. But even this marriage did not escape pain. Only a few months after the wedding, Goddard miscarried their son. It was the only pregnancy of her life, and the loss cut deeply. Over time, grief, career pressure, and the growing shadow of Meredith's political troubles pulled them apart. By 1949, they were divorced. In the middle of all this, war changed the course of his life once again. In 1942, while many celebrities stayed near the spotlight in safer ways, Meredith joined the U.S. Army Air Forces. He was already in his 30s, older than many new servicemen, but he enlisted anyway. He first trained as a pilot, then shifted into work with the Office of War Information, where he helped produce films meant to train troops and lift morale. By 1944, he had reached the rank of captain. His service was real, not decorative, and it placed him inside the machinery of wartime America at a moment when millions were being drawn into the global conflict. Then came one of the strangest turns in his story. In the summer of 1944, he received an official honorable discharge arranged at the highest level so he could play war correspondent Ernie Pyle in the story of G.I. Joe. The request was approved despite objections, and it happened because the filmmakers and powerful people in Washington believed Meredith was the right man for the role. Pyle himself had chosen him after meeting him in New Mexico while recovering from a near-fatal incident during the war in Europe. The film, directed by William Wellman, was made with unusual seriousness. It used real veterans from the Italian campaign as extras, many of them bringing their own hard-lived truth into the scenes. Meredith played Pyle not as a heroic symbol, but as a tired, observant, compassionate man trying to stay close to ordinary soldiers. The movie followed infantry life from North Africa into Italy and earned wide praise for its honesty and emotional power. Meredith stood at the center of it, carrying the story with a worn humanity that felt true to the reporter he was playing. Then reality struck again. In April 1945, Ernie Pyle was killed during the Battle of Okinawa, shot by Japanese machine gun fire on Aoshima. He died instantly. The film had already been shot by then, but Pyle had seen the production in motion and approved of Meredith in the part. When the news of his death reached those connected to the film, it changed the feeling around the release. What had already been a serious work became something even heavier, almost a memorial. Meredith had portrayed a man the nation admired, and before the audience could fully absorb the performance, that man was gone. The film went on to earn multiple Oscar nominations and lasting respect. Military leaders praised it. Critics admired it. Years later, it would even be preserved in the National Film Registry. Yet the honor of that work and the reality of Meredith's war service did not protect him from what came next. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, as anti-communist hysteria spread through America, he became one of the many artists damaged by the blacklist. His liberal politics and union leadership made him suspect in the eyes of the era's investigators. He was labeled difficult, dangerous, or disloyal, depending on who was talking. Film work largely disappeared for years. That fall was bitter. A man who had served in wartime, led actors, built a major career on stage and screen, and played one of the most respected journalists of the war, suddenly found himself pushed aside. For about a decade, he was kept largely out of the film world and had to rely on stage and radio work. Yet even then, he did not vanish. He endured. And later, with time, he found a kind of revenge in performance itself. In 1977, he won an Emmy for playing lawyer Joseph Welch in Tail Gunner Joe, the very man who confronted Senator McCarthy with the famous question that exposed the cruelty of the anti-communist spectacle. After everything Meredith had gone through, that role carried a special charge. It was not just acting. It felt like a reckoning. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Burgess Meredith suddenly found himself standing in the middle of one of the most frightening storms in Hollywood history. The House Un-American Activities Committee had begun hunting for supposed communist influence in the film industry, and anyone with liberal views quickly became a suspect. Meredith had served as president of Actors' Equity from 1938 to 1939, and his outspoken opinions made him easy to target during Senator Joseph McCarthy's crusade. The investigation into Hollywood had started in October 1947 with the famous Hollywood 10. Soon the spotlight widened, and more actors were dragged into the hearings as what the committee called unfriendly witnesses. Around 1950, Meredith was summoned to testify not long after appearing in The Man on the Eiffel Tower. Sitting before the committee, he refused to fully cooperate and invoked the Fifth Amendment, rather than answer their questions. That single decision changed everything. In the tense climate of the Red Scare, refusing to cooperate instantly marked someone as dangerous. Studios panicked. RKO and Paramount quietly cut ties with him, unwilling to risk angering politicians or the public. Only a few years earlier, Meredith had been one of Hollywood's respected actors. He had starred in films like Of Mice and Men in 1939 and The Story of G.I. Joe in 1945, performances that critics praised and audiences admired. Yet by 1950, his career collapsed almost overnight. Friends who once filled his phone lines began to disappear. The gossip columns whispered that he was politically suspect, and producers no longer wanted his name attached to their projects. When Meredith appeared before HUAC, he refused to confirm or deny any connection to the Communist Party and would not name colleagues. The committee labeled him an unfriendly witness. That label pushed him directly onto the Hollywood blacklist, an unofficial industry ban that quietly destroyed more than 300 careers between 1947 and 1960. The effect was brutal. After 1949's The Man on the Eiffel Tower, the film roles stopped completely. Agents stopped calling. Studios would not cast him. Newspapers began describing him as a pink sympathizer. Just a few years earlier, he had appeared in nearly 20 films during the 1940s, but by 1951, the offers had vanished. Without work, Meredith was forced to sell possessions just to survive. Historians later estimated that he lost roughly $200,000 a year in potential earnings, a huge amount at the time. Some actors saved themselves by naming colleagues to the committee, but Meredith refused. He was not jailed like the Hollywood 10, yet the punishment still felt severe. For more than a decade, he simply disappeared from movie screens. The blacklist did not only hurt his career, it reached deeply into his personal life. The financial damage alone was devastating. Before the scandal, he earned about $100,000 per film. But during the blacklist years, he received no studio paychecks at all. Bills piled up. Investments were sold, including shares in his High-Tor Ranch property. At the same time, his marriage to actress Paulette Goddard began to crack under the pressure. They had married on May 18, 1944, at producer David Selznick's home. But tragedy struck that same year when Goddard suffered a miscarriage. When Meredith's career collapsed, the emotional strain only grew worse. Crowds sometimes shouted accusations at film premieres. People screamed, "Communists!" from the sidewalks. Goddard once joked that she wished she could throw diamonds at them just to silence the insults. Yet the tension between them never fully faded. By June 1949, the marriage ended in divorce. Meredith later admitted that the blacklist had placed enormous negative pressure on his life and relationships. Afterward, he sank into periods of deep depression. The man who had once stood among Hollywood's leading actors now wandered through uncertainty, unsure how he would rebuild his future. Even during this difficult time, Meredith refused to betray colleagues in order to regain favor. During his HUAC testimony, he invoked the Fifth Amendment more than 100 times, carefully avoiding answers that might lead to contempt charges like the prison sentences handed to the Hollywood 10 in 1948. Since film work was gone, he turned to whatever acting jobs he could find. Broadway theater offered occasional lifelines. He appeared in productions such as Happy as Larry in 1950. Radio dramas on NBC gave him small paychecks. During summers, he joined traveling theater companies, earning around $500 a week, performing in stock productions. The money was modest. Sometimes he earned only $10,000 a year from theater and narration projects. Still, it kept him working. He narrated documentaries like Works of Calder in 1950 and slowly rebuilt his reputation on stage. Television appearances were rare. In 1953, he guest starred on Ford Theater, but the major roles remained out of reach. Many actors faced similar exile. Lee Grant, for example, lost more than a decade of her career to the blacklist as well. Looking back, Meredith called those years the darkest period of his life. Yet the struggle also sharpened his skills as a stage performer, and critics began praising the depth he brought to theater roles. Then, years later, fate offered him an extraordinary moment of poetic justice. In 1977, he appeared in the NBC television film Tail Gunner Joe. The story focused on Senator Joseph McCarthy's rise and fall during the anti-communist hysteria of the 1950s. Meredith played attorney Joseph N. Welch, the man who confronted McCarthy during the famous Army McCarthy hearings. The real Welch had delivered a devastating line during the hearing on June 9, 1954. Looking directly at McCarthy, he asked quietly, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" That moment effectively ended McCarthy's political power. When Tail Gunner Joe aired on March 29, 1977, nearly 30 million viewers watched Meredith recreate the scene. His performance earned him the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor on July 25th that year. Meredith later joked that the role felt like splendid revenge, more than 25 years after his own career had been damaged by the same political crusade. By then, his life had already begun turning in a new direction. Director Otto Preminger played a key role in breaking the silence surrounding blacklisted actors. In 1962, he boldly cast Meredith in the political drama Advise and Consent, a film that challenged both censorship rules and political fear. The movie was released on June 6, 1962, and featured Meredith as Senator Herbert Gelman. The decision was risky at the time, yet it worked. The film earned more than $6 million on a $3 million budget, and Meredith received the National Board of Review Award for Best Supporting Actor that year. The performance restored his credibility and proved that audiences had not forgotten him. Preminger continued hiring actors who had been pushed aside by the blacklist, including Will Geer, and Meredith appeared in several of the director's later projects. After 16 years of limited film opportunities, his career finally opened again. A few years later, another unexpected opportunity appeared. In 1966, at the age of 58, Meredith joined the cast of ABC's colorful new television series, Batman. He was cast as Oswald Cobblepot, better known as the Penguin. The show premiered on January 12, 1966, and Meredith's first episode was titled Fine Feathers, Foul Play. Wearing a top hat, monocle, and carrying a trick umbrella, his waddling villain quickly became one of the most beloved characters on the show. He appeared in 21 episodes between 1966 and 1968, tying Cesar Romero's Joker as the series' most frequent villain. The series itself became a cultural phenomenon, attracting nearly 20 million viewers each week and climbing to number 5 in the Nielsen ratings. Meredith's Penguin grew so popular that the writers often kept extra scripts ready whenever he was available to film. What made the character unforgettable came from a strange accident on set. Meredith was a heavy smoker, and during filming, the Penguin was constantly shown puffing cigarettes. The thick smoke triggered severe coughing fits while cameras were rolling. One day, during the first episode's production, Meredith coughed so hard that the sound came out as a strange, raspy quack. Director Lorenzo Semple Jr. heard it and suddenly shouted for him to repeat it. Meredith realized the sound could hide his coughing while staying in character. He practiced until the strange noise became a signature quack. The accidental sound soon turned into one of television's most recognizable villain laughs. Every appearance of the Penguin used it, and the character's popularity exploded. The strange little sound born from a coughing fit in January 1966, would echo through pop culture for decades. Yet even before Batman revived his fame, Meredith had delivered one of television's most unforgettable performances. On November 20th, 1959, he appeared in the Twilight Zone episode, Time Enough at Last. In the story, he played Henry Bemis, a quiet bank clerk who loved books more than anything else in the world. His wife mocked his reading habits and even tore apart his poetry books. His boss also hated the idea of employees reading. During a lunch break, Bemis hid inside the bank vault with a copy of David Copperfield. Suddenly, a massive nuclear explosion destroyed the city above him. When he finally emerged, the world around him had been reduced to rubble. At first, he felt despair, believing he was the last person alive. Then he discovered the ruins of a public library. Thousands of books lay untouched among the broken shelves. Bemis realized he finally had endless time to read everything he loved. But while picking up the books, he stumbled. His thick glasses fell to the ground and shattered. Without them, he could barely see a word. Surrounded by mountains of books, he collapsed in tears and cried out that it was not fair. The heartbreaking twist stunned viewers. TV Guide later ranked it among the most memorable moments in television history. Rod Serling trusted Meredith so much that he invited him back for 3 more Twilight Zone episodes. Meredith appeared in Mr. Dingle, The Strong in 1961, The Obsolete Man the same year, and Printer's Devil in 1963. His 4 starring roles tied the record for the series. Decades later, when Twilight Zone the movie premiered on June 24, 1983, Meredith served as the narrator. One opening scene even referenced Henry Bemis and his broken glasses, reminding audiences of the haunting story. From blacklisted actor to television icon, Meredith had quietly rebuilt his place in entertainment. Then, another remarkable chapter arrived. In 1976, at the age of 68, Meredith stepped into a role that would make him unforgettable for a new generation. Sylvester Stallone had written the script for Rocky in just 3.5 days after watching Muhammad Ali fight Chuck Wepner on March 24, 1975. Stallone insisted on starring in the film himself and personally pushed producers to cast Meredith as the tough boxing trainer Mickey Goldmill. Filming began on January 9, 1976, in Philadelphia, with a tiny budget of about $1 million. Meredith's gravelly voice and fierce presence transformed Mickey into the emotional heart of the story. The film exploded into a global success, eventually earning more than $225 million worldwide. Audiences loved Mickey's harsh wisdom and unforgettable lines, urging Rocky to go the distance. Meredith returned in Rocky the Secours in 1979 and Rocky III in 1982, with later flashbacks in Rocky V. Despite the praise, the Academy Awards never gave him the Oscar many believed he deserved. He received nominations in 1976 for The Day of the Locust, and again in 1977 for Rocky. Yet both times the award went to other actors. Even so, his performances left a lasting mark on cinema. When Mickey died during Rocky III in 1982, audiences across the country openly wept in theaters. The film earned more than $270 million worldwide and cemented the character's legacy. Late in life, Meredith proved he still had the power to steal scenes. In the 1990s, he played the mischievous Grandpa Gustafson in Grumpy Old Men and its sequel. Audiences roared with laughter at his outrageous jokes and fearless humor. Behind the scenes, however, Meredith carried a private struggle. In 1994, when he was 87 years old, he released his autobiography titled So Far, So Good. In the book, he revealed a secret he had hidden most of his life. Since childhood, he had battled cyclothymia, a chronic form of bipolar disorder that caused intense mood swings. He described his early years as grim and chaotic, filled with fear and emotional turmoil. Singing in the choir at St. John the Divine Cathedral in New York gave him his first escape from that troubled childhood. Those same emotional swings shaped many of his decisions throughout life. They pushed him into sudden career changes, risky creative choices, and turbulent relationships. His personal life reflected that struggle. Several marriages ended painfully before he finally found lasting stability. In 1951, he married Swedish-American ballerina Kaja Sundsten, who would remain his partner for the rest of his life. Together, they raised 2 children, Jonathan and Tala, and built a quiet family life far from Hollywood chaos. Her steady presence helped him survive both the blacklist years and later fame. During his final years, Meredith faced serious health challenges. In the mid-1990s, he was diagnosed with both melanoma skin cancer and Alzheimer's disease. Even while memory problems grew worse, he continued working when possible, relying on cue cards during the filming of Grumpier Old Men in 1995. On September 9, 1997, Burgess Meredith died at his Malibu home at the age of 89. His wife and children were beside him during his final moments. His son, Jonathan, later confirmed that complications from melanoma and Alzheimer's disease had taken his life. Friends and colleagues mourned deeply. Sylvester Stallone said that Rocky would never have the same emotional heart without Meredith. Jack Lemmon remembered him as one of the warmest people he had ever known. When the final numbers of his life were counted, Meredith had spent nearly 7 decades working in entertainment. He appeared in more than 100 films, directed projects, produced plays, and wrote books. By the time of his death, his estate was estimated at around $15 million, built from royalties from Rocky, Batman, Twilight Zone, and countless other projects. His Malibu home alone later sold for $4 million in 1999. Yet many fans still felt that Hollywood had never fully rewarded the actor who had given it so many unforgettable performances. Perhaps the strangest irony of all remained that Twilight Zone episode from 1959. In it, Henry Bemis finally gains the endless time he always wanted to read, only to lose his glasses and watch his dream vanish.